So today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Daf Mem Vav, Bava Metzia 46. It's of course a very difficult daf, so we'll do the best we can with this beautiful daf on 46. And you guys are doing the daf, or what are you doing, Rafi? You doing the daf? Oh yeah, you do the daf? You do the Baruch Hashem. All right, so we're going to start on the bottom of 45b. Daf is dedicated for Yeshua, for Am Yisrael, Shmira for Am Yisrael, the Chayalim, and of course for the Shvuyim. So yesterday, we're going to start on 45b, 5 lines from the bottom. Yesterday, the Gemara had said that money, the Gemara discussed whether or not, so there are different ways of making a kinyan. What's a kinyan? A kinyan is called an actual transaction, and it's the point of the transaction where the transaction becomes valid. Kinyan is called an actual moment where the transaction happens. So we had said in our chapter that the kinyan can happen if you give money to somebody to buy a fruit or an object. Then when you give the money, you don't acquire the fruit. It's only when the fruit is pulled by one person to acquire it, that's when the kinyan happens. Well, what about, the Gemara said yesterday, what about if you want to designate the money? You say, there's money, let me say to the person else, there's another way in which you could do something. You could do a kinyan, and that's what's called a kinyan sudar, or a kinyan chalipin, where you have a handkerchief, and let's say you want to buy a watch, you say to the person, pick up my handkerchief, and then I buy your watch. So that's called, you're exchanging two items, or through a handkerchief, which is symbolic of the item. That's called a kinyan sudar, and that's another way of doing it. When we sell the matzah, when we sell the chametz, there are two aspects. One is people appoint the rabbi to be their agent. You don't really need a kinyan for that. You're just appointing the rabbi, but people like to pick up the handkerchief. But when the rabbi goes to sell the chametz to the Gentile, we do several different types of kinyanim because we're not sure which one is the most effective. So one of those is the kinyan sudar, kinyan chalipin. Yesterday we had discussed whether or not you could say, I'm going to designate my money as a form of not, we're going to say my money is not money, it's an object, and therefore cannot be done in the kinyan chalipin. So we said yesterday that was a dispute between Rav and Levi, whether or not you could designate the money as non-money, but as an object. What's the idea that you need an object to do kinyan chalipin? Based upon the pasuk in the book of Ruth, at the end of the book of Ruth, that the pasuk says that he removed his shoe. So the way he used to do a kinyan was you remove your shoe and give it to somebody else. Show of now, you remove the shoe and give it over. So it says Rav Papa now in today's daf. So that was a dispute whether or not you could designate the money as an object. So it says Rav Papa, 5 lines from the bottom, Afilu uman da amar ein matbea nasa chalipin. Even according to the position that says that a coin cannot be designated, coins cannot be designated as an object to do the kinyan chalipin. Mi'avid hu d'lo avid chalipin. Okay, granted, it itself cannot effectuate the chalipin by handing over the coin, but iknuye makne miknu bechalipin. It can itself actually be acquired via kinyan chalipin, meaning to say that they could be acquired by somebody giving a handkerchief. I said, I want to get your $50. I could give you my handkerchief to pick up, and thereby I acquire your coins. So even though the coins cannot effectuate it, it can be acquired in that manner. Why? Because it's like fruit, according to Rav Nachman. Because Rav Nachman says, whether or not, can you use fruit as a form of chalipin? Does it have to be exactly like the shoe in the book of Ruth, which was removed? So Rav Nachman, he says fruit even though it cannot effectuate the chalipin transaction, it can only be, but it's still nevertheless, it can be acquired through a kinyan sudar, through a chalipin. So too, we're going to say the money, even though it cannot effectuate the chalipin, nevertheless, it can be acquired in that manner. And so therefore, Tibanami Loshna. So too, we're going to say the same thing by the coins. So the Gemara challenges this idea that a coin can be acquired through a kinyan chalipin. The Gemara challenges this from a Mishnah. Mishnah and Meiser Sheni. And what is the Mishnah Meiser Sheni saying? Meisvei haya omed begorin. Now let's just talk about Meiser Sheni for a minute. Meiser Sheni is the fruit that you tithe, and the part of the tithe you have to bring it to Jerusalem to eat. That's the fruit. But let's say it's too much for you to bring, so you could transfer it onto money. Now, if it's your own Meiser Sheni, when you transfer it, you have to add 20%. That's the din. But if you're redeeming somebody else's Meiser Sheni onto money, you don't have to add the 20% surcharge. It's only if it's your own that you have to add the 20%. So now we have the contradiction from the Mishnah Meiser Sheni. Hayomi begoran. Let's say you're standing in your threshing floor. The aim biyado. You don't have any money, and what you want to do is you want to save the 20%. You want to do harama. It's called like a legal fiction. You don't want to pay the surcharge. We always have people like that. Hayomi begoran. The aim biyado, but you don't have any money. Omer el chavero. You could say to your friend. Haray Paris, hello, I'm giving you this Meiser Sheni fruit. I'm giving it to you. And now, basically, since he got it as the gift, it's a Meiser Sheni, he can redeem them without paying the fifth. So but obviously, you want to bring it up to Jerusalem to eat. So you're not really giving it to him. You're just giving it to him because he's your friend. That's why he says your friend. He's giving it to you so you can play along. And this is the way you do it to avoid the 20%. Kind of like selling the chametz to the nachri on the eve of Pesach. So top of 46a, we say v'chozer v'omer, and then you go back to him and you say hareim l'chulawin amos sheyesh li b'bayis. He says, okay, you know what? I'm going to deconsecrate this money. Your fruits will be deconsecrated on the money that I have in my house. And then basically the fruit is no longer holy, and I just need to take the money to Jerusalem. Now, what's the reason why this works? Time of the Imbiyado most. The reason why he has to do it like this is because he doesn't have the money on him. Because if he had the money there, he wouldn't say this stipulation, but he would just give this money to his friend, and his friend would just pull the money to him. But from the fact that he has to do it this way, it shows that he didn't have the money with him. If he had the money with him, then he would have been able to have acquired the money by pulling on the fruits, and thereby he acquired the money. And so therefore, uparak, and then he could have used uparak dachi adif davle nachri. Now, and so therefore, if he had the money with him, he could have just pulled on the fruits. He could have just pulled on the fruits and thereby acquired the money, and then he would have been able to redeem the fruits with the money, because that's certainly better, because then the person who's redeeming it has the actual money with him, and thereby he's able to do it. Now, but if you want to say that money could be acquired through chalipin, there's another way he could have just said it. He could have just said, give me a handkerchief to pick up, and you'll thereby acquire the money. But we see from the fact that we're saying, no, you would have had to draw the money towards you in order to acquire it, that it doesn't work through a chalipin. And so therefore, since we don't allow him to use the kinyan suitor, this is a proof that you can't acquire the money using this type of technique. And so, because that would have been less of a legal fiction. This proves you can't acquire the money through a kinyan suder. You have to actually draw it towards you. You had a question, Bill?
You're saying what's being exchanged. One person is trying to buy more. What's he giving?
All he needs to do is give a handkerchief which he pick up. That would be symbolic of the fact that he's buying something. He's giving the handkerchief.
So there's an exchange of an item.
An exchange of an item. The handkerchief is symbolic of any item that could be exchanged. So the Gemara said, yeah, well, the handkerchief is being exchanged, but he gives it back because he says, I don't need to keep it. So he says,
it just seems like it's
well, one person's getting the money, the other person's getting the handkerchief.
well, they're not identifying the object.
Well, the handkerchief is the symbolic of the fact that that's the action. That's the consideration. So the Gemara says, well, no, the reason why you can't do that here, so from the fact that you do a kinyan suder here, doesn't disprove that you can acquire money in this manner. And isn't that money cannot be acquired through this kinyan chalipin? The Gemara says, no, that's not the answer here. Why? Belay's place suder. The guy, the person doesn't have a handkerchief. He's standing there without any clothing on. So the Gemara says, well, then he could give it to him through the guy who wants to give him his money. He gave him his handkerchief, and the other guy was supposed to take the money, but doesn't have a handkerchief. Well, what about the ground? He can give him the ground, and by dint of the fact that I'm giving you the ground, you're also getting the money. The guy who's sitting there, he has this food, so he wants to give him his ground, and then you'll get my money. So he says, no, the way is Likarki, he has no land. The Gemara says, well, only Begorin Katani. It says he's standing on the threshing floor. Yeah, Begorin Sheino Shalo. It's not his threshing floor. He has the fruits, but not the threshing floor. The Gemara says, the Tana is going to such an extent to teach us about a guy who's standing there naked. The way slave will come, he's standing there without anything. You think that's what's going on? So the Gemara says we reject that possibility. You can't acquire the money in that manner. You cannot acquire the money in that manner. Meaning to say, this guy cannot acquire the money in that manner. You can't acquire the money through a chalipin. So the Gemara says, even Rav Papa himself, by the way, I wasn't 100% clear because we're going to get to this, is the dispute amongst the Rishonim. Who has to have the handkerchief here? It seems from our Gemara that the person who's giving over the fruit is the one who had the handkerchief. But from another Gemara, tomorrow's daf, we're going to see that this is a dispute. Whose handkerchief do you have to use? That's going to be all question. We'll have to table that discussion. Just bear that in mind. Whose handkerchief is being used?
The seller.
Yeah, exactly. The seller and the buyer. We'll leave that aside for tomorrow. Like I said, this is a very difficult chapter. You can't deal with all the questions at once. You really have to do the whole chapter, then go back and do it a second time and a third time. Rav Papa himself reversed his position. That Rav Papa said that money could be acquired through this kinyan suder. He himself changed it. How do we know this? Rav Papa himself had 12,000 coins with a person who he deposited with, let's say a bank, in this place called Bechuzai Mechuza, and he needed to get it. But the guy the bank, let's just say, the person who had it, didn't want to give it to his agent because the halacha is that the bank or the person who is watching the deposit is responsible until it will get back to Rav Papa. So he says, why should I give it to your agent? I still have responsibility. So therefore, Rav Papa needed to give the money to his agent. So when the banker gave it to the agent, he was giving the money straight to the person who owned the money and not to his agent. So after Papa Hadareki, Hadar Papa Avali Tracer Alpha Dinar Bechuzai, Ikninu Rav Shmuel Bar Acha, Agava Sipa Debeta. So he did what's called the Kinyan Agav or Kinyan Karka. He says, I'm giving you like this threshold of my house, and thereby I'm giving you the money. I'm giving you the money in that manner through what's called a Kinyan Karka, Kinyan Agav, which is another way in which we sell the chametz to the Gentile. We rent out a portion of our property, and by virtue of that, we transfer all the chametz along with it. So that's why I say we're renting out, let's say, a closet to them or wherever we keep the chametz. But he didn't. Why didn't he use a kinyan sudar? He could have given it to his agent through a handkerchief. So the fact that he used the kinyan karka, not kinyan sudar, means that a kinyan sudar is not a good way to transfer money. And kiyasa nafak la'ape atavach. And when you probably remember this Gemara anyway from the end of Bava Kama, but when the agent came back, Rav Papa went all the way out to Tavach to greet him. So that proves that you can't use a kinyan chalipin to acquire, or kinyan sudar to acquire money. V'chein amar Ula, so too Ula also taught, ein matbea nasa chalipin. Ula himself also taught that a coin cannot make a kinyan chalipin. You can't use money instead of a handkerchief to acquire the fruits. Remember we said that was a dispute. V'chein amar Rav Asi, ein matbea nasa chalipin. So we have another position. Now Rav Asi says that. V'chein amar Rav Bar Chana, Rav Yochanan, ein matbea nasa chalipin. So we have three Amoraim will all say that the coins cannot be used as a chalipin. So now the Gemara says, how does Ula say that you can't use the coin to effectuate a transaction? How does he say that? So Eisvei, so the Gemara challenges this position. Eisvei Rabbi Abba Ula. How can you say that you can't use a coin to effectuate a transaction? Let's say there was a guy. He hadn't paid his workers. You have to pay your workers on time, but he hadn't paid his workers. So the guy's walking around in the street, and he has no money on him, conveniently, right? And so then his donkey drivers, who he hired as workers, he's got a whole trucking company. They Tovin so but shook. They come up to him in the marketplace. They say, "Give me my money. Give me my $1,000 that you owe me." So he has to give them the money. So he like these guys want their money now. They don't want to wait till next week. So he says to the shochani, he says to the money changer, "Daily b'dinar mos, give me some money. Give me basically give me enough coins that are equal to a dinar, enough copper coins that are equal to 1 gold dinar, va'afarnasem, so I could pay them. I need to pay them. Va'ani elelcha yafa." And what I'll do is I'll give you dinar v'trisas mimel sheyesh li b'beisi. I'm going to give you a dinar, and I'm going to give you a little extra, a trisas, a little extra. Now, if this was a loan, this is a straight out prohibition called ribis. You can't charge interest. So we can. But if it's a purchase, I'm purchasing your money, then it's okay. You can exchange currency for a higher rate. So that'd be okay. But how do we know the difference? The question is, does he have the money right now in the house? If he doesn't have the money, it's a loan. If he has the money, it's a purchase. So now, im yesh lomos, if he has the money, mutar, then it's not a loan. He's just, I'm buying your money with my coins in my house. V'im lav, but if he doesn't have the money, aser, then it's going to be prohibited. Yes.
I hear what you're saying. I don't understand the conceptual difference. The idea here that what he's doing is purchase and not money.
But he has the money in his house. He says it's yours at this point. The money's in existence. He's giving it to the money changer. It's just not on me right now. As opposed to a loan where I don't have the money yet. If I don't have the money, it's a loan. But if I have the money, you just have to get it from there. Then it's a purchase. So he says, but this goes to Bill's question right now. If you're going to say the coin cannot be acquired in this manner, how is he acquiring the money that he has in his if you're going to say a coin cannot be acquired through this chalipin, then it's not going to be acquired wherever he is. It's going to be a loan. because how is the guy going to acquire it at this time? He says, I'm just giving you the money and I'll get it later. So it must be that the money is going to be acquired through a concept of chalipin, meaning to say, I'm giving you the money changer gives him the money, and thereby he acquires the other money that he has. So that must be what's going on. So this is a problem on Ua, because Ua says that you can't acquire money through chalipin, that you can't use chalipin, you can't use coins to serve as a kinyan chalipin. So when Ula heard this, he was quiet. Ishtik, he was quiet. He seemed to be like a good question against him. But then Rabbi Abba, who asked the question to Ula, himself helps him. Rabbi Abba says to him, Amarle, no, Dilma Idi v'Idi v'Pruto Shanu, the Leko Ayutiba. Let's assume, why do you assume we're talking about actual money? Maybe that these are just coins that have their value for their metal, but not for their value as currency. And so therefore they're both considered fruits, and therefore they can be acquired through chalipin. Maybe that's what we're talking about here in this case. And Ula liked that answer. I'm right in, yeah, indeed. Dekanami dekatani yafa dinar utrises. He says, I'll give you a nice dinar and an extra tresis. V'lokatani dinar yafa utrises. And he says, I'll give you a nice coin and a tresis, and he doesn't say, I'm going to give you a dinar yafa, which would imply that it's a valid coin in currency. So yafa dinar implies I have coins worth the value of a dinar, as opposed to dinar yafa, which means that I have a coin that could be used as a currency, as legal tender. Shema mina. So that's Ula's. Ula says, okay, we see that the coins cannot be acquired through chalipin, but this is not talking about coins. It's talking about peiros. It's talking about fruits. Rav Ashi gives a different answer. Rav Ashi says, no, what we're talking about here is olam b'damim. No, we're talking about a case where really it is. He says, I'm going to give you actual money, but ubeprutos. And nevertheless, what we're talking about here is we're talking about copper money, which has no form on it. The kimin de islay nas the kaomer. So we're saying that in this case, he says in this case, even though we don't do the kinyan now until I get them in the home and then I'll bring them to you, and it's technically speaking like a loan, but nevertheless, that he says, lend me the money until I find my son, or until I find my key, which you already had yesterday, which we said the prohibition of interest doesn't apply in that case. Since the money that you have to return it is already in existence and it's right there, the rabbis say it's not prohibited. So you had a problem, Bill? So that's why. So the Gemara says, okay, now we want to say, we're trying to prove whether or not a coin can be used as like a soother, as like a handkerchief to effectuate a transaction. Tashma, let's try and bring a proof from a Mishnah in Kedushin. What does the Mishnah in Kedushin say? Kol hanaseh damim ba'acher, kiven shezacha zeh nischayev zeh b'chalipin. Anything, now what does the word damim here means? It means anything that's money for something else, anything that serves as money. Once one person acquires it, once you take it, maybe say if I have like $50, it's money, and once you take it, the other person acquires the other object. Straight out, it seems that money could work as chalipin. So isn't that a direct proof that you can use money as chalipin? Doesn't that mean that straight out? When it says this idea, aren't we talking about coin? Isn't this a direct proof that a coin could serve as like a kinyan chalipin, as a kinyan suitor? So he says, Amar Rav Yehuda, Rav Yehuda says, well, this is what it means. Doesn't mean we're on top of 46b. No, anything that has a value. You need to say not actual money, anything that has a value of money. I hate that. So my phone thinks I'm talking, my watch thinks I'm talking to it. It doesn't mean that it's actual money. It means anything that has the value of money. That damim here doesn't mean money. It means that it has a value. And indeed it's logical. Because from the fact that the next clause in the Mishnah states, what are we talking about? We're talking about that if you exchange an ox for a cow or a donkey for an ox. So it's not actual money, it's only the value of money. Shmamina. So it's clearly we're not talking about actual money, we're talking about the value of money. So the Gemara says, well, according to the one who thought at first that we're talking about actual money here, well, what was he thinking? My Kate said, how does he explain the second clause of the Mishnah, which seems very clear that we're talking about not actual money, but talking about an object? So how would he explain that? So the Gemara says, this is how he explains it. That fruits also can not only money, but also fruits or objects or can be used to effectuate a chalipin, to effectuate a deal. And how so? Okay, it's that. So he's saying, explaining, not only actual currency can do it, but also an object. So now the Gemara says, well, both according to the position that we see from here, that fruits can, according to everybody, both opinions here, a fruit, i.e. not an actual utensil, can effectuate a transaction, can work for chalipin. Seems very clear from this. Well, according to the one who asks it, and the one who was challenged, very clearly, fruits can be made as chalipin. Paul, this is a problem, because Rav Nachman himself said that fruits can't serve as chalipin. He says, since the verse in the book of fruits talks about a shoe, only a utensil can effectuate a chalipin, and not a fruit. What's a fruit? Like an animal, a cow, or it can't. So the Gemara,
Is the fruit the larger category
no, here they're two separate things. A utensil is a keli, and a fruit is something that's not a keli, like a cow or a piece of apple. So according to Rav Nachman, so this Mishnah works according to Rav Sheshes, who says that a fruit can serve as its kinyan chalipin. El Rav Nachman damar kli'in aval perilo avdi chalipin my ketzad. But according to Rav Nachman, who says that a utensil can serve as a chalipin, like a shoe, a watch, a handkerchief, but a fruit cannot. What does it mean when it says ketzad, that you could exchange the ox with the cow, or the donkey with the ox? How would Rav Nachman explain this Mishnah? Hachakamar. So this is what it means. Yesh damim shehein kechalipin. So Rav Nachman would say is that there are some payments that they're like, there are some payments for an object that you can acquire with a kinyan kasef without pulling it, with money without pulling it. Just like sometimes chalipin works without pulling it. Kate said, how could this happen? We're talking about where, let's say you sold an ox to your friend, and they agreed that you're going to pay this much money for it. And he pulls the ox, and then he owes the money. And then hechlif demei shor b'para o demei chamor b'shor. And so afterwards, he has to pay that amount of money. And both of them agree that that's what he has to do. So the owner of the cow has to give to the owner of the ox the cow, and neither one of them can return. So in that case, we're saying that the value of the ox allows you to buy the cow without actually pulling the cow. Meaning, saying once you pull the ox, you've acquired the other cow. So now the Gemara says, okay, but what's the reasoning? Now, after we described it, now we explain it. My time with Rav Nachman. What's the reason why Rav Nachman says that you can't, that under these circumstances the money acquires, but didn't we say money cannot acquire utensils? So Sabal Rabbi Yochanan the Amar, he says, Devar Torah Mos Konos. He says, biblically speaking, money will acquire utensils. Biblically speaking, why in this particular case, that in a case where you exchange the value of the ox for the cow, then it's going to acquire the metalton. But why in that specific case does the acquisition work? Hold on, let me just remove my phone so it doesn't bother him. Okay. Why in that case does it work? So we say, because biblically speaking, money really does work as a kinyan. Vartar Moas Kanos. Biblically speaking, I give you $50, really I've bought your wheat. Biblically speaking, I've bought your wheat. So why do the rabbis say, actually, if I give you $50, I haven't bought your wheat until I actually pulled it? Gezerah Shema, because the rabbis made a decree, Shema Yomer Lo Nisrfu Chitecha Ba'aliyah. Because the rabbis were concerned that maybe I'll give you the $50 for your wheat, and I'll say I own it, and the wheat will still be in your attic, and then there'll be a fire in your attic, and you're not going to move to save my wheat. So, because it's not your wheat. And so the rabbis didn't want to create that scenario, which would create a lot of fighting. And so therefore, the rabbis made the decree to say that in that case, the wheat, you can't acquire something by giving money for it. Because you can't acquire a movable by giving money, because unless you have it in your possession, all sorts of bad things are going to happen. But since the whole reason is just a rabbinic decree, Rav Nachman's on the position that when did the rabbis make a decree? Only milsa de shlicha, on something that's a regular, typical sale, Gazer Rabbanan. But milsa de lo shlicha, but something that's not a typical sale, like for example, he wants to acquire a movable with the money of another movable, or the value of another movable. Lo Gazer be Rabbanan. The rabbis did not make the decree in that case. So this case, which they were talking about, which we had talked about a minute ago, which is the case of the cow and the ox, where he's exchanging the value of the cow for the value, or the value of the donkey for the ox. There, we're going to say that's a case that's not common, and therefore the rabbis didn't make the decree. So the Gemara says, well, how would Reish Lakish, who argues with Rabbi Yochanan, and he says that biblically speaking, money does not acquire it. Reish Lakish to Amar Meshicha Mefureshes Minator. Reish Lakish says that biblically speaking, you can only acquire something by pulling it, not with money. How would he explain this part of the Mishnah? Keitzad Hechlef Shor B'Para. He says, Hani Chayisav Rav Sheshes. It would make sense if Reish Lakish holds like Rav Sheshes, who says that fruit can effectuate a chalipin. Then Mitaritz like Rav Sheshes, and he'll explain that our Mishnah is clearly following Rav Sheshes. Eliyahu like Rav Nachman. If he holds like Rav Nachman, who says that fruits cannot make a chalipin, he's like Rav Nachman, Damar Perelo Abdi chalipin. And also he holds, like we just said, Matbea Lokani, that coins cannot, biblically speaking, acquire something. How would Reish Lakish explain the second clause of this Mishnah? So therefore we have to say, Al Karchal Karav Sheishis Mitaritz. It must be that Reish Lakish can't hold like Rav Nachman, because his position doesn't work. So now the Gemara says that we've seen that there are several Amoraim who are of the position that coins cannot effectuate this transaction. It cannot make a chalipin. And also, we've seen that there are some opinions that say a coin cannot be acquired through a chalipin. So the Gemara challenges this from our Mishnah. Now we go back to the Mishnah that we started this whole discussion with 2 days ago, where we said in the Mishnah, what did we say in Mem Daled Amud Aleph? It said, all the movables acquire each other. For Amar Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish says, what does it mean all the movables acquire each other? I feel kismalei mos, but kismalei mos, that if I'm trading you my wallet for your wallet, that's a valid method of acquisition. So how could you say that this is a valid method of acquisition if we've seen so many opinions that say that a coin cannot effectuate a transaction and cannot be acquired? So aren't these coins? So the Gemara says, no. Bedinar Anka Va'anigra. No, we're talking about a case is these coins are not serving as coins. These coins are serving as a commodity. These are coins that have been taken out of currency. What is Ingara? The king said that you can't use this coin anymore, and another type of these coins is that a coin is the coin which people stop using. People don't trust the currency of this country anymore. It's whatever. It's like a cryptocurrency gone out of style. I don't know what the rabbis would have said about cryptocurrency. Presumably, you can't use that to effectuate it's the whole idea of transactions today, which is all in the internet, makes no sense according to this because this is you have to pull something here. Nothing even exists. It's all virtual. So anyway, even credit cards, or I guess the signature doesn't work by the Torah. That signature doesn't mean anything. Anyway, utzricha. So therefore, we need to learn it in both laws. Why? Because if we just had a case where the king canceled this value as a coin, I would say mishum sagi klal, meaning to say it's not accepted anywhere else. So also Medina. But if this country disqualified it, I would say, okay, the Sagli of Medina, it's okay in a different country. I might say it's still a coin. I might have said it can't be acquired that way. And if I said it's just this country canceled it, I would say Mishum Delo Sagile, because it can't be collected there, not in public or private. So Malchus, the Sagile Bitsina, people, even though the king canceled it, people still trade with it in private on the black market. I might say it's still a good coin. And therefore, excuse me, and a coin can't be acquired through Chalipin. So therefore, it's Sricha. So therefore, we need it to be taught in both cases. Okay, so this is today's daf. Obviously, like I said, this whole chapter is not the easiest chapter to do, but we have what to look forward to because daf nun is, some say, is the hardest daf in all of Shas. So that we have to look forward to. That's coming up upon us, and Baruch Hashem, we could climb that mountain together. Shkoyach.